So your goal is to vomit on whoever's trying to eat you. That's their survival strategy.
Hi, I'm Sam with Ever Widening Circles, and I'm here with the amazing Nathan Robinson.
Hello, everyone.
He is a marine biologist and is currently in France.
I am indeed.
So we are here today to talk about something awesome that you found very deep into the ocean. It's a giant squid. And what is a giant squid? What is it?
So the giant squid, it's the species, the best way to describe it is it's the species that inspired the Kraken. So all this kind of Clash of the Titans mythology and Greek mythology, Norse mythology, when they're talking about this huge squid, octopus-like animal that was dragging boats to the bottom of the ocean, what it was based on was the giant squid, the biggest invertebrate, so the biggest, one of the biggest animals on this planet.
I was reading that their mantle was like 7 feet.
Yes.
Like, that's insane.
So they're huge. So the biggest ones, there's a lot of different estimates as the biggest one, but the best estimates are somewhere around 14 meters, so 42 feet in length. So a 2-story building.
That's with tentacles.
With tentacles.
With tentacles. You were saying that their eyes are about like yay big, like face big. Yeah.
Bigger than my head. I have got a big head and they're bigger than my head.
That's insane.
It's about 10 inches in diameter. They're the biggest eye in the animal kingdom. So they have a bigger eye than a blue whale. Blue whales might be bigger in size, but the giant squid eye is the biggest eye in the animal kingdom. And the really cool thing is, one of the ideas that people think they have such a big eye is not for spotting their food, it's actually for avoiding predators. And their biggest predator is a sperm whale. And sperm whales don't produce any light, so when you're in the deep sea, when everything's black, you don't think you'll be able to see a sperm whale regardless of how big your eye is. But what's super cool is there's bioluminescence in the deep sea, which is little microscopic things that make light. Yeah. When a sperm whale swims past them, then little things start lighting up around them. So you have this like glowing outline of a sperm whale, and that's what giant squid are using their eyes to spot. To spot the bioluminescent outline of hunting sperm whales.
Jeez. What a terrifying thing to have come out of nowhere. That is a very cool alarm system of the deep, though, where it's just like there's something coming, and you just see it.
But it's amazing, and this is kind of one of the big mysteries of deep sea science is almost everything produces light. 80% of life in the deep sea produces light.
Yeah.
And for we have a good idea for some of this stuff, but for other stuff, you're just like, why? You would think, why would you create light? Light, all it really does is potentially attract other things towards you.
Yeah.
Why would, if you're in perfect darkness and just want to go about your own business, why would you create light that could potentially spot something could potentially use to find you? And there's lots of cool ideas. For some animals, you produce such a bright light that actually scares away anything that might be trying to eat
like
you.
The puking shrimp that you were talking about. Is that the idea? Okay.
Well, yes. And the other idea, so the puking shrimp, the shrimp spew. So there's a bunch of deep sea shrimp that spew bioluminescent material when they get upset. So they vomit all this bright neon blue stuff. And the two ideas is it's so bright that it scares away anything coming along. So anything might be coming along to eat the shrimp, you just vomit out the stuff. But secondly, if you vomit on the person trying to hunt you down, now you're covered in this bright blue stuff. Now any bigger predator can then eat that animal. So your goal is to vomit on whoever's trying to eat you. That's their survival strategy.
Wow. But the giant squid doesn't produce any light, right? It's just using the light as like a warning.
As far as we know, some species of squid do produce light. And the colossal squid, which is actually a squid that potentially might be bigger than the giant squid, does potentially produce light.
What?
But the giant squid doesn't, as far as we know. But we don't think the cool thing is I found with all this is like no one's collected footage of a colossal squid in its natural habitat. We know they exist. We found them like dead at the surface or caught by fishing boats and brought to the surface. No one's seen one alive just doing colossal squid things in a colossal squid habitat.
Yeah.
So it's cool. It's imagine if no one had ever caught. Think of like one of the biggest animals on land. Imagine if no one had ever actually seen an elephant. You've a couple of dead ones. You've seen a couple of bones. You might have seen a carcass of one lying around, but you've never actually filmed a live elephant. And that's what it's like with the colossal squid. It's an animal that's one of the biggest animals on this planet. We have no idea how it moves, what it looks like, how it interacts with things.
That was the same story for the giant squid until you guys came along, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Go team.
So you guys, the last video that you found, the reason that you reached out to me was because you guys were able to capture footage of a giant squid instead of like the first video of a giant squid in US waters.
Yes.
And the second video of them to ever exist. Right?
Yes. It's like a dream come true.
Yeah.
Being part of it.
Legends on film. Literally.
And huge kudos has to go to Dr. Edie Widder. So
yes.
Edie is one of the huge deep sea scientists, huge marine biologists of the world, a massive inspiration to kind of marine biologists everywhere. And yeah, back in 2012, she caught the first ever footage of a giant squid in US waters, the first ever video. And then I had the absolute privilege to collaborate with her last year and kind of repeated success. We got the second one, and it's incredible. Every time I see that little clip of tentacles, the animal kind of coming out, it takes me immediately back to where I was when I saw it, and it still just makes my jaw drop. A lot of my job as a marine biologist is watching video footage. So some hours of my life watching camera traps, or I do a lot of stuff that you've done a wonderful job covering before, like putting cameras on sea turtles and things like this. And for this project, I'd already watched about about 120 hours, of footage of the occasional vomiting shrimp.
Yes.
Always entertaining.
Thank you for showing up.
a couple of deep sea sharks, which is super cool. A couple of deep sea fish, a couple of nice things here and there, but a lot of nothingness. A lot of all you see is, we call this marine snow. It's like organic matter. So all the stuff that was in the surface just slowly kind of traveling down the water column, and it looks like snow because it just looks like these tiny little fragments, like snowflakes falling down. So I'd watch. It's pretty, but kind of boring. I'd watch that for 120 hours, and then all of a sudden, you see this little thing. It sneaks on camera, vanishes, comes back about 2 minutes later, sneaks on camera, vanishes, and then on the third time, I still remember that moment. It kind of opened up and bam.
Yeah. I know, like, the Kraken is like talked about as like this like ferocious thing. Like, would you, from what you've seen, like, would you describe giant squid as that so far? What's the personality?
the personality. So here's something I find beautiful about the video. And you watch the video, you see the animal kind of. Number one, it doesn't just come in and attack and try to tear everything apart. It checks out from a distance, see if things are safe, comes back a little bit later. It's inquisitive, it's interested. And then on its third attempt, it decides, okay, I'm going in, I want to figure out, I can smell something, I can see something, I need to go figure out what it is. Comes in, it wraps its tentacles around our bait, and then it realizes that our lure that we're using is actually just a light. It's like something we call an E-jelly. It simulates the pattern that a deep sea jellyfish makes, the bioluminescent pattern. It wraps it around that, but that's just a plastic shape, nothing tasty, whatever. And within 2 or 3 seconds, it's like, this is nice, and it just vanishes. And it you kind of expect to see this terrible monster, and you don't get that feeling at all. You watch the video, and it's this kind of. To use that idea that you hear so much about wildlife, is it's more scared of you than you are of it, and you do definitely get that feeling. It feels very timid and spooked by the whole thing. This isn't a rampaging, destructive monster that's dragging sailors to its depth. It's just another animal just trying to survive, and trying to stay out of trouble.
And that's what's been so amazing about the technology that you guys are using, right? Where I was watching Edie's TED Talk, and she was talking about how all of the machines that have been used for deep sea exploration may have actually contributed to the fact that we haven't been able to find the giant squid.
Completely.
We hadn't been able to see it.
The camera we used is called the Medusa, and
cool.
yeah, it's nice even like just through its name. The whole idea is built on this concept of stealth. As you mentioned earlier, the giant squid have the largest eye in the animal kingdom, so they can see light from a huge distance away. They're also highly intelligent animals. Cephalopods, squid, very, very smart, problem-solving animals. If you're cruising around in the deep sea, you can probably see the light of, say, a submarine or a remotely operated vehicle and these kind of deep sea robots a long, long time before you appear on the cameras or you're seen by the pilots of the submarine. And these animals are probably just seeing these huge lights with these loud noises because of all the propellers and stuff like that, and just being like, nope, some other day, and just swimming off into the distance. So there's literally thousands of dives and thousands of attempts to film giant squid, and they never worked. And it was only until Edie really developed this technology, this stealth technology, that we finally started finding giant squid. And the beautiful story is Edie built this camera, took it to Japan, and on its first deployment, I think it was within 5 minutes or something of actually reaching her appropriate depth, she had recorded a giant squid. And the technology works. And we proved it, again, by going to the Gulf of Mexico. So Japan, the waters of Japan, are renowned for being kind of giant squid hotspots. Yeah. We know they're in the Gulf of Mexico, but it's not renowned. It's not like a world hotspot. But the technology worked. So we're now incredibly excited. Now we're pretty sure we've cracked the problem. Yeah. These stealth cameras, this is what we need to use to find these animals. So we're now hoping to build more and improved cameras to help try and get even more footage elsewhere around the world.
Now, so you are working towards doing another expedition right now. You're raising money for that. There's a GoFundMe. The link is in the article. So what are your goals? Like, what's the point in learning more about the giant squid? Like, why should we care about this, to put it bluntly?
Okay, so I guess first of all, yes, thank you so much for mentioning the GoFundMe. We're trying to rebuild this camera system. The camera system that we built is almost 10-year-old technology now.
Oh, wow.
Anyone who's been seeing how we've been through, like, in those 10 years, GoPro have gone from the GoPro 1 to the GoPro whatever. Yeah. That's just a good example of how quickly camera technology is moving. We can now build the exact same camera it would be far better in kind of every way. It would be smaller, lighter, easier to maneuver, which means we can deploy it to more cases, easier to charge, which means you can spend more time in the water every time we're out on an expedition. Lower lights, which means we'll probably attract more life towards us. Higher resolution cameras, so as opposed to getting this grainy footage, we're actually going to be getting high resolution HD or even 4K quality. And there's also ways nowadays that you can adjust, even when we're using red lights, to start to pull out natural colors out of these images. So we should be able to get full color, high resolution images in a package that the previous camera, the Medusa, is like 200 kilos. It's like 400 pounds or something silly. Yeah. It's like 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot, like a meter by meter by meter. It's difficult. You need a boat with an A-frame or a winch or some heavy-duty machinery to kind of deploy it. We can now build that whole system into something that would fit into a duffel bag quite easily. Wow. So that's the GoFundMe. That's the pitch. To redesign this camera. The other nice thing about this camera is not only would it allow us, like the scientists, to now start deploying these cameras in multiple places around the world. What's amazing is we no longer need a big boat. We can now just take out any old boat, because it's a small little thing that we throw on the side. Now, this doesn't mean, this is not just important for us, but if other people want to build these, this now means that any hobbyist who wants to start filming some of the deep sea in a very low impact way, they can go and buy their stuff. You're doing a sailing trip around the world, or you can buy one of these cameras, you can throw it off your boat and deploy it, and then you can collaborate with scientists like myself, and then start collecting incredible data about a habitat we've never explored, and be part of scientific discovery. So that's my big pitch.
I didn't even put that together, that would it be like open source technology or just technology that like other people could purchase? I don't know how that works.
So it's not really open source technology. It's more like the technology that someone else can purchase. We'll build it, and the companies we're collaborating with will build the camera. But what is kind of open source is the science.
Nice.
So
Okay.
what I love the idea is there are. So think about this. What scientists, I'm a marine biologist. I spent so much of my life just putting cameras in different places in the ocean to study what's going on. But there's a million and one other people who are also putting cameras in the ocean every day. There's commercial fisheries or tour guides. There's tourists. There's a million and one people who are out in the ocean for whatever reason with their GoPros, with their paralens cameras, with whatever camera system they have. They're actually collecting data.
Yeah.
If we could find ways to access those data, then if I want to study the health of, say, coral reefs around the world, it's not just me swimming through one area in the world photographing coral reefs. You contact all these people who are collecting footage. Then you can start to get information on the health of coral reefs worldwide.
Yeah.
And we're trying to take that same idea, just apply it to the deep sea. The only people in the deep sea right now are commercial enterprises. So people who are looking for kind of resource, to be honest, like resource exploitation, mining for oil, mining for valuable chemicals, and researchers, and deep sea fishing as well. But if there are people who, the same way that we've all, like, so many people have GoPro cameras now and then put them on their poles and stick them under boats when they're cruising by dolphins and things like this. If we could kind of make a nice little small setup that anyone on their boat or a ferry, or someone in their sailing boat or luxury yacht, we can give them a package, a camera, and say, here it is, just put this in the ocean. You have no idea what you're going to find. They can start to send us that footage back.
Yeah.
If we get that footage, we can start to figure out. So I'm sure you've heard the idea that we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the bottom of the ocean.
Right.
And people say this all the time. Deep sea scientists, we love to say this. We know more about the surface of the moon than we know about the bottom of the ocean. What I find so interesting about that concept is we're talking about the surface of the moon and we're talking about the bottom of the ocean. What we never ever talk about is the part of the ocean between the bottom and the surface.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do deep sea exploration, you nearly always take a submarine or you take your little robot and you go down to the bottom because that's where the majority of life is, and you cruise around, and that's what we're exploring. We know so much more about the bottom of the ocean than we know about the middle of the ocean. The area that's just water in every direction. We very rarely go there, but that's the lair of the giant squid. That's where giant squid and some of these huge deep sea species, these 6-gill sharks that grow to the same size as great whites, these fish species we never found before. This is where all these animals live. So this is like the final frontier, in my opinion, of our planet's exploration. And as we find out more about these habitats, I mean, if we can get more people with more cameras, that's more information. The more information we have, that means not only there's the wonder of learning more about our planets, but there's the conservation side. Mm-hmm. We can start to learn about how many of these different species there are, where they dispersed, if we want to protect them, what parts of the water do we need to start protecting, where do we start placing marine protected areas, all that kind of jazz.
How everything is connected.
So that kind of gets to your second question, which was like, why do we care?
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, one answer is what I just mentioned a second ago, which is conservation. If there's animals in the middle of the sea, we have no idea where they are. We have no idea if humans are having an impact on their populations. If the populations are increasing, if the populations are decreasing, we can wipe these species out and have no idea. So there's an important part to just find out what is in these habitats, because then we know what we need to protect. I think the world is a richer, more captivating place with species like this still living inside it. And I think our lives, almost everyone's lives, are enriched by these animals. And I think about it in terms of, think how much like mythology and legend and movies are inspired by the kraken, the giant squid. If you take that species out, you take that out of existence, then all these myths and stories and children's stories and movies no longer exist. They're no longer quite as magical as they once were because they're just made up animals. It's imagine living in a world without tigers or lions. And if you take out lions, you might be like, oh, well, I've never seen a lion. But if you take out lions, there's no more Lion King.
Yeah.
There's no more Disney movies. You think about all these stories you read about all these majestic animals. It's just this majesty of the world and the things that capture our imagination that make it worth living. This feeling of wonderment when you see some of these animals and have experience with them. And that's something that we're going to lose. That's something we won't be able to pass on to our children unless we take care of it. To me, it's almost perverse that we don't use that. Very rarely use that same logic. So I often try to use the exact same logic. And I honestly, when I'm making this, because I have to justify conservation, I have to justify the amount of effort and time and money we spend on protecting the planet. I have to do this all the time. I'm doing this literally every day of my life.
Yeah.
And I much prefer, instead of using the argument of it puts fish on your table or it cleans CO2, I much prefer the ever widening circles kind of ideology of I do it because I think it's wonderful, it's beautiful, it's exciting, it makes me enthusiastic about living my life.
Yeah.
Like I think that's to me that argument actually trumps the whole like it puts fish on my plate, because I'm like, yeah, sure, I can live without fish. It helps clean the water system. Whatever, I could just drink water I just collect rainwater. There's a million one reasons I can justify. I don't need that part of my life. You can't do the same justification for oxygen and CO2, but more or less you can do the same thing.
People have been.
But yeah, but just that sense of beauty, that sense of wonder.
That's as personal as it gets. You know,
yeah.
Like that affects you living on a visceral level.
Yeah. And the more you learn about things,
the
more, and I fully believe this, the more you learn about things, the more beautiful they become.